Noa Tishby, welcome to Jerusalem Dateline. You're the new Special Envoy for the State of Israel, combating anti-Semitism and the delegitimization of the State of Israel. What was your reaction when you were chosen?
So my reaction was surprise and honor. I was sitting with the Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, and he offered me this position. Obviously, Israel never had a special envoy for combating anti-Semitism and delegitimization, so I was blown away and honored, and immediately turned to him and said, "What does this mean, though?" And he goes, "Well, it's the first one. Let's make this up together to do this job." And of course, my reaction immediately was, well, you're offering me a job that I'm going to fail at, because nobody can combat and defeat anti-Semitism. It's the oldest form of hate and discrimination that is still being practiced. However, and having said that, I'm very excited to receive this position and to actually get to work.
Yeah. Do you see anti-Semitism exploding or rising around the globe?
Absolutely. There's no question. And I think everybody is well aware of it. Over 1 billion people hold anti-Semitic views around the world. 50% of college kids in America are hiding their Jewish identity, and 65% of them say that they are afraid and don't feel safe. This is something that should worry all of us. So yeah, absolutely. Anti-Semitism is on the rise yet again.
You say that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism are one and the same. Why do you say that?
Well, if you have an aversion to borders, okay, if you don't like the concept of a nation state and you would like to dismantle every single nation state in the world, then yeah, okay, you're not anti-Semitic. But if you have a particular obsession for one country and one country only, and you have a delegitimization concept towards that particular country, and you want to deny the Jewish people of their nation state and sovereignty in their ancestral land, there's a name for that, and that's anti-Semitism. So denying Israel's right to exist, denying the Jewish people sovereignty in their ancestral land is anti-Semitic, period.
Yeah. You grew up here in Israel, Noah, and now you're living in the U.S. How did both growing up here in Israel and living in the United States prepare you for this role?
What a great question. Thank you. I always say that I am 100% Israeli and 100% American. So to me, understanding both cultures in such a, I hope, a profound and deep way is allowing me to create this pipeline and this bridge between these two cultures. I understand the problems that Israelis have with Americans and the problems that Americans have with Israelis, and I am able to actually communicate to these two cultures in a way that I hope is effective.
And you wrote a book, Noah, I think is one of the best primers, actually, to introduce people to Israel. Is sort of the outline of what you may be planning, what you could read in this book?
Yes, and definitely in the context of explaining the justification and the moral justification, historical justification for the existence and the safety and security of the State of Israel, not as a Jewish issue and not as an Israeli issue, but as a U.S. and international national security and Western civilization security. So yeah, you can definitely find the buds of what I'm going to be doing in this position in my book. Yeah.
In your book, you talk a lot about the relationships, your mother, your father, your grandparents. How did your family prepare you for this role?
They did, unknowingly. I obviously grew up in a very Zionist family, surrounded by people who devoted their time and passion and life to the safety and security of the State of Israel. And it's something that as a young child or a younger adult, I didn't actually notice. What I wanted to do was be in entertainment, and I did that for many, many years. But underneath it, there was always this passion and this inability to be quiet when misunderstandings or falsehoods were being spoken next to me about Israel. So it was one of those things that I think I was being prepared for it for my entire life without ever knowing this. And I'm glad this is coming to fruition right now. I hope to be of service, and I hope to be helpful for the state of Israel, the Jewish people, and the world at large, hopefully.
Yeah. So when you came to the United States, was it a shock to you that people really didn't understand about Israel?
Huge shock, huge shock. I tell the story in my book that one of the first time that I encountered misunderstandings about Israel was when we were hanging out as young adults. There was a girl who was she was an actress and already successful at the time, and ended up being way more successful, like every single one of your viewers, like everybody knows who this woman is. And she comes up to me one day and she goes, I heard you're from Israel. And I said, yes. And she goes, so how does your family feel about you? And I'm like, I think they're fine. Why? And she's like, no, that you're not wearing all the headgear and everything. So she literally thought that Israel was Afghanistan. And I remember I was in my early 20s and I looked at her shocked, but I didn't take this to mean that she is an idiot. I didn't take this to mean that she has an issue or that she is misinformed, because here was a successful, well-educated, smart girl who had no idea. And it occurred to me at the time that, wow, I was like, wow, Israel must have a big problem if this is what this woman thinks. And it just, it turned out being a bigger problem than I thought. And it turned out from being a cute Hasbara issue to an actual national security problem for Israel, which is why I'm here.
Yeah. Well, right now, Noah, you know that there was a rocket fired just yesterday by one of the groups there in the Gaza Strip. There's been riots on the Temple Mount. Sadly, there's been a wave of terror attacks here in Israel. And it's for many people that live here in Israel, it's almost like seeing this movie again. Do you see this kind of time right now, and we see these kind of this wave of terror, just an opportune time to explain to the world what's happening here in Israel?
Well, unfortunately, the way it comes out in media and social media around the world is exactly the other way around. So the people in the region understand the cynicism of the radicals that are barricading themselves inside the Temple Mount, trying to prevent Palestinians from actually praying and using the mosque on Ramadan. So again, if you're in the region, you know the cynicism, you know exactly what is going on. You know that these radical groups are trying to lure Israel into a conflict yet again, including Hamas from Gaza. And what happens after is that because the inability, the rioters inside the mosque, the Israeli police has to intervene. These videos then are being filmed and then they're being distributed on social media without any context, and this looks horrible. So unfortunately, every time there's a situation like that, the world media immediately jumps on Israel, even though this was not at all Israel's intent, nor did Israel start this. So it's radical groups in the region that are trying to lure Israel into a conflict, and unfortunately, the way that this comes out internationally is Israel looks terrible.
Yeah, final question, Noah. Even though we do see some tragic things happening here in Israel, there is room for optimism with the Abraham Accords. Do you see room for optimism and here in the region? And any final thoughts about your new role?
I am an optimist, and I believe the human spirit is stronger than anything else. So the Abraham Accord are an incredible indication to what can happen in the region when there is collaboration and cooperation with the Jewish state within the Middle East. And I hope that many other countries are going to join this party, because this is a party that is better for human advancement and it's conducive for human development. This is a good
I would
thing.
agree. Well, Noa Tishby, thanks for joining us on Jerusalem Dateline, and all the best in your new role. Kol
Thank you so much.